We begin with some breaking news that's just coming in. The Israeli military says Iran has launched a fresh wave of missiles towards Israel just a short while ago.
Well, in a post, Israel's defense forces said that its defense systems are operating to intercept the threat. The military instructed the public to enter protected spaces and remain there until further notice.
Now, shortly after that, loud explosions were heard in Jerusalem. Now, an AFP journalist has reported that the ambulance service has been called to more than one place in greater Tel Aviv area right now. These are some breaking news just breaking in. Israeli military has said that Iran has launched a fresh wave of missiles towards Israel a short while ago.
And in a post, the Israel's defense forces have said that its defense systems are operating to intercept the threat. The military has instructed the people to enter protected spaces and remain there until further notice. And shortly after that, loud explosions were heard in Jerusalem.
Well, these are the latest that we are getting. All right, we'll now just cut across to our guest, Lester Minson. He's joining us from Washington, D.C. and is a senior fellow at the National Security Institute. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Great to be with you.
Well, let's begin by now saying this. Donald Trump has said that there is probably a good deal that could come, but has also said that they need to fight it out first. What do you make of this statement?
Well, I suppose President Trump is trying to account for all of the things that could happen and then somehow take credit for them, which I suppose is politically savvy. It is very likely that this conflict will not continue forever. So at some point there will be some kind of arrangement between Iran and Israel, whether explicit or implicit, and maybe President Trump wants to take credit for that. But it's also clear that there's going to continue to be fighting for the next few days. So he's trying to acknowledge the things that are going to happen and not be against them. It is clear, and I think he's correct, that the fighting is going to continue for some time. But then we'll see what happens, whether one of the two sides is willing to change its position, hopefully Iran, and is willing to go to the table and negotiate with the U.S. and other countries for an end to its nuclear weapons program. But right now, it's unclear whether they're going to be willing to do that.
Right, Mr. Minson, and Iran has already said that it's not looking to escalate and is actually ready to come back to the negotiating table. And from a policy standpoint, is this a realistic path back to the negotiating table given the escalation that we're witnessing right now?
Well, I think there's a real question politically whether Iran, the Iranian regime, would be able to sustain kind of its political enterprise if it actually engaged in negotiations after this. That would be an incredible signal of weakness. However, the Iranian regime right now is quite weak. It is unable to hold off almost any Israeli attack. It offers no defense to Israeli drones and missiles and aircraft, whereas Israel is able to shoot down 95 or 98% of the attacks coming from Iran. So Iran's in a real weak position here. Is the regime going to be willing to acknowledge that and move to negotiations? And if so, will it be able to continue as the governing entity, or will someone inside the Iranian government kind of seize control of things because it's going so poorly for the Iranians, and we could see a potential change in government here? I think that's a decent possibility at this point. I don't want to predict that the Iranian government is going to fall or anything, but if the time seems ripe for someone in Tehran in a position of power to push out the ayatollahs and the generals and say, it's time for new leadership because this is not working.
Right, so and having said that, there's also reports from the Fox News that, that Trump has actually vetoed a plan to take out Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And now, having said that, it has also killed top commanders. And while we do understand that internally it has weakened the Iranian leadership, do you think it is possible that Khamenei was actually a target?
Well, if President Trump says he wasn't, and the Israelis are saying he wasn't, then I suspect he was in fact not a target. It would be a mistake for the West, whether the United States or Israel or anyone else, to think that you can come in and change the government in Iran. That is not a sustainable position. What can happen is for Iranians to take charge of their own future, including those people close to power, and take action themselves to push out the people who have failed and install new leadership. It doesn't necessarily have to mean revolution in the streets. It could mean someone in the military seizing an opportunity. It could mean someone in very high up politically seizing an opportunity behind the scenes to change things. That seems like the likely path to me, not change from the outside or change because of mass demonstrations on the streets. That just doesn't seem to be happening right now. And one of the things we should be realistic here. While Iran is unable to resist attacks from the outside, it does maintain the ability to control its own people. There have been demonstrations across Iran. The government has squashed those. It has a pretty effective internal security mechanism cracking down on any kind of dissent or any kind of free speech. So the regime has been able to defend itself from outsiders and its own people, but it may not be able to defend itself from those inside the government who want to see change.
Right, and that being said, because it seems like that regime change is what Israel is hoping for, and because we saw Netanyahu's trying to tell the Iranian people there, which of course we'll have to see if that actually happens, but telling them to change your regime there. But then can Israel actually afford to prolong this war when there has been attacks in Israel itself? People are also being killed on Israel's side. Can Israel take that kind of risk?
Well, Israel's seen much worse in its 75 or so years. Every death is regrettable, frankly, on both sides. It's unfortunate. War is a terrible thing. We should not be rooting for war. But I think Israel realizes that in order to maintain long-term viability as a nation state, it must do something about the Iranian threat now, while Iran is incredibly weak. So Israel is going to be willing to absorb these losses, as terrible as they are. They are not strategically significant losses, which is a cold-hearted thing to say, but it is true. So Israel is going to be able to sustain this damage and press on with the war against Iran. The question is, I think, the weaker party is the Ayatollah and his regime. Will they be able to survive this very, very public global demonstration of their utterly ineffective way of ruling Iran?
And would you say that was the goal of the U.S.? Because they seem to be pretty relaxed. I mean, we don't see much reaction. They'd be like, there's going to be a good deal, but they got to fight it out. So, of course, Israel will not be doing this alone. So was that the goal, which probably would say Israel carried out?
Well, most of the weapons Israel is using come from the United States. The U.S. is the strongest backer of Israel. It remains so. President Trump has been explicit in his support for Israel. Certainly Congress is also extraordinarily supportive of the state of Israel, particularly at this moment. So I think we're going to continue to see that this alliance, if anything, it has only gotten stronger in the transition from President Biden to President Trump. At the same time, President Trump is willing to let Iran make some decisions here, and if it wants to carry out the fight, he is certainly not going to stand in their way, explicitly so. So I think this is not just a U.S. decision or a President Trump decision. This is also an Israeli decision. They're the ones who are taking the risks here in a very real way, and they've made the decision to take the fight to the Iranians.
Right, so and if we go by the trajectory that we're on right now, do you think that in more ways than one, it also resembles what you are seeing in Russia, Ukraine? And do we stand at a point where we can potentially see those patterns getting repeated in West Asia now?
Well, I think they're very different situations. Russia is trying to take over Ukraine. Israel has no interest in taking over Iran. I don't think, frankly, at the end of the day, I don't think Iran anymore has the ambition that it can take over the state of Israel with all of its proxy forces, with the possible exception of the Houthis having been utterly thwarted by the Israelis in the last few months. So this is a very different situation. It is more complex. It has more implications for certainly the Middle East region. They're both very serious. They're both of concern, I think, to all freedom-loving and democratic peoples around the world, in India, in the United States, and elsewhere. These are both of great concern, but they're very different conflicts. And I think I'd be reluctant to draw too many parallels between them.
Well, of course they are different. Hopefully it won't be similar in the the kind of length they've gone through. Of course, I'm hoping for this to be solved probably earlier than it will take in Russia and Ukraine. But thank you so much for joining us on the show and giving your perspective.
My pleasure. Thank you.